The Roman Empire dazzles us with its grandeur, its mighty legions, its marble temples, its bustling markets, its amphitheaters echoing with the roars of gladiators and the cheers of the crowd. But beneath the glory there was another Rome, a quieter, smellier, and much more human Rome. Because just like us, Romans had to deal with one universal question that no empire, no matter how powerful, can escape. What happens after nature calls? Imagine yourself walking through the narrow, crowded streets of ancient Rome 2,000 years ago. The air is filled with the scent of baked bread from a vendor's stall, the chatter of merchants haggling, the clatter of carts on cobblestones. But mixed with that is another, less pleasant aroma, one that drifts up from the drains, the latrines, and the cesspits hidden beneath the grandeur. For all their engineering brilliance, Romans did not have toilet paper. Instead, they had something far stranger, something that today might make us shiver. Picture this. You step into a Roman public latrine. Unlike the private bathrooms we know today, this is a social affair. A long stone bench runs along the wall, with round holes carved into it at regular intervals. No privacy, no partitions. Just you and a dozen others, shoulder to shoulder, doing your business while gossiping about politics, chariot races, or who's cheating whom at the baths. Beneath the bench flows a channel of water, carrying away waste. Ingenious, yes, but what about cleaning yourself afterward? This is where the Roman imagination stepped in. Instead of paper, leaves, or cloth, they used the tersorium, a communal sponge on a stick. It might sound shocking, but this was everyday reality. The tersorium was kept in a bucket of salty water or vinegar near the latrine. When you were done, you would dip the sponge in the water, give yourself a wipe, rinse it again, and leave it for the next person. One tool, many users. In a time before germ theory, it didn't seem so horrifying. But to us, it is the stuff of nightmares. Think of the sound, the slap of water, the scrape of the sponge against stone, the dripping of vinegar. Think of the smell, pungent and sour. And think of the line of Romans sitting together, passing along jokes, passing along gossip, and perhaps passing along more than just that. Because historians today believe that these communal sponges may have spread disease. In fact, some scholars suggest that parasites and intestinal illnesses were common in Rome precisely because of habits like this. But let's not laugh too quickly. To the Romans, the tersorium was a clever, efficient solution. Toilet paper, after all, wouldn't be invented for another 1,000 years in far-off China. So what were the alternatives? Some Romans used pieces of broken pottery, called pessoi, smoothed down so they wouldn't cut the skin. Imagine wiping with a hard shard of ceramic, harsh but effective. In other places, smooth pebbles served the same purpose. Wealthier Romans sometimes used wool, rose petals, or scraps of cloth. But for most ordinary citizens, the sponge on a stick was the daily tool. Roman writers even joked about it. The satirist Seneca once mentioned people who wiped themselves with their own hands when nothing else was available. Martial, another poet, mocked a rival by suggesting he was so poor he had to use his fingers instead of a sponge. These jokes, crude as they were, remind us that wiping was as much a part of Roman life as eating or drinking. They knew it was funny, awkward, even shameful, and yet it bound them all together. Now picture again the Roman latrine. Light filters down through an opening in the roof, glinting off the wet stone. You hear the murmur of men talking about Caesar's latest decree, the rattle of a coin purse, the splash of water below. A man beside you picks up the tersorium, rinses it, and uses it without hesitation. To him it's normal. To us it feels unimaginable. But Rome thrived not by doing what was comfortable, but by doing what was practical. And it wasn't just in Rome itself. All across the empire, from the windswept frontiers of Britain to the sun-baked deserts of Egypt, Roman latrines stood as symbols of civilization. Soldiers, merchants, slaves, and senators all used the same system. The sponge on a stick was the great equalizer, uniting rich and poor in a shared, if somewhat unsavory, ritual. Imagine a legionary in a camp on the Rhine, shivering in the cold, wiping himself with the same tool as his general. There is something oddly democratic in that image. Yet, hygiene aside, Roman toilets were also places of danger. Ancient texts warn of explosions caused by methane gas building up in cesspits. Some people feared demons or spirits lurking in the sewers, ready to snatch the unwary from below. Pliny the Elder, the great Roman naturalist, described accidents where snakes or rats shot up through the holes. So even in relieving yourself there was an element of risk. And when you reached for the tersorium, who knew what germs or curses it carried? Let's not forget the Roman obsession with baths and cleanliness. At first glance it seems contradictory. They built massive bathhouses with heated floors and intricate plumbing. They oiled their bodies, scraped their skin, and washed in communal pools. Yet after all that luxury they wiped themselves with a reused sponge. But in their minds it was not dirt, it was routine. The vinegar water was thought to cleanse and purify. The flowing channels beneath the latrines carried waste away from the city, reducing smells and keeping the streets cleaner than in many medieval towns centuries later. If we pause to think about it, maybe we shouldn't judge too harshly. After all, what do we do today? We cut down forests to make paper, bleach it with chemicals, flush it with gallons of clean drinking water. The Romans, in their own way, were more sustainable. A sponge could last, vinegar disinfected, water kept flowing. Primitive, yes, but resourceful. And the story doesn't end there. Archaeologists digging up Roman sites have found the remains of these latrines, the channels of water, even ancient sponges preserved by time. In places like Ostia, Rome's port city, you can sit on the very stone benches where thousands once sat side by side. When you do, you cannot help but imagine the laughter, the chatter, the grumbling, the wiping. It makes the past feel suddenly alive, not in marble or bronze, but in the most ordinary of human needs. There's even evidence that some Romans carried personal wiping tools, much like we carry handkerchiefs or tissues. Wealthy travelers may have brought their own sponges, unwilling to share with strangers. Others perhaps improvised with moss, hay, or cloth. But the common Roman, in the bustling heart of the city, relied on the trusty communal tersorium. So next time you sit in the comfort of your private bathroom, with soft rolls of tissue stacked neatly beside you, remember the Romans. Remember the sponge, the vinegar, the stone bench, the laughter of strangers. Remember that civilization is not only measured in laws and temples, but also in the humble act of wiping. The Roman Empire has fallen, but its echoes remain, in our roads, our laws, our architecture. And perhaps, in the quiet moments when we close the bathroom door, we can spare a thought for those who came before us. For in the end, the question of how to wipe is as timeless as history itself.